I'm eager as always to host today's community conversations that are dedicated to this back to school time. We thought it would be great to talk about interpreter training in August. It was hard though for us to invite speakers for this conversation since we all know so many amazing trainers. And if we start choosing, we will definitely leave behind some very worthy trainers. And if we invite the very best, right, such as, let me throw some names that you all know: Cindy Roth, Marjorie Bancroft, Zarita Raju Lane, Karen Rushke. I can continue with 10, 20 people like that you all know off the top of my head. Then we may be doing a disservice to all amazing trainers who have emerged in the last uh, 5 years, 10 years. Also, you all have your favorite trainers, or the trainers who were your first. Like, I am forever indebted to my first interpreting trainers in the US, Marvin Bazikalupa Tips, Judith Kennickson Christie, Julie Burns, Esther Diaz. But what we wanted to do instead is take a totally different approach. We want to focus on different aspects of interpreter training as a field. We have four amazing individuals today who are all trainers and whom many of you know. And in our opinion, they represent four different challenges and perspectives that a trainer faces in our field. A healthcare system workforce developer who is trying to ensure that the system's interpreters get education custom fitted to that system needs, and that's so. A certified interpreter who positions herself as a trainer focused on many aspects, but recently more on the interpreting skills, and that's Liz, in my opinion. A manager of a training organization that has been in the industry for several decades, and I'm a graduate of it too, and is adjusting itself to a new reality, Tamas. And a director of a nonprofit organization which has competing priority and needs that go beyond training, and that's Kevin. So without further ado, I'm giving the floor to Zoe to navigate us through all these challenges and issues.
Thank you, Natalia. Thank you, each one of you, for being here today. My name is Zoe Schutzman. As you can see, I am thrilled to be a part of this conversation. I am here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and my title is what I like the way Natalia put it, in developing the workforce when it comes to what are the needs of the organization, the system, and especially when we have bilingual individuals who are interested in becoming qualified, trained as dual role medical interpreters to better serve their patients, as well as supporting the staff interpreters who are full timers in the Department of Interpreter Language Services. So it's a pleasure for me to be here today. And I would love to start us off with just one of several questions that I had thought of in anticipation of this roundtable dialogue. And I'm going to start by throwing that first question to you, Liz, if you wouldn't mind. And the question here that I had put together was, what in fact do you believe is essential in order to propel our interpreter educational endeavors and the profession forward towards greater interpreter skills as well as knowledge preparedness across language pairs? So that's my first question.
Thank you, Zoe, for that great question. Yeah, I'm happy to kick that off. I think just very briefly, I have a lot of thoughts about this, but I think very briefly, fundamentally, I would like to see more opportunities for more trainers to get trained, um, and um, and to be trained on a variety of topics. Like giving feedback, for example. That's my thing, is feedback and peer feedback. That's a big thing that I've really experimented with a lot. Really, in the last several years, is kind of handing things over to students and trainees and kind of letting them train themselves under the guidance of an instructor and educator. So I would love to see some more work done on peer feedback. And also just I'd love to see more work in terms of getting trainers more ready and comfortable working in the online space. I hope that online training is something that we'll see more of, but I think that we need to prepare more trainers to work in that space. So that's my short answer.
And who would you like to hand off to?
Oh, yes, of course. Yes, Tamas, I will pass the baton to you.
Oh, I'd be happy to, but I also wanted to ask Liz, do you want to take a second to tell us where you're joining from?
Oh, of course. Thank you. Yeah, I'm not in the sky somewhere. I'm in Houston. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Thomas. I'm here from Seattle, or I am in Seattle right now. I'm joining from there. I work at CCHCP, the Cross-Cultural Healthcare Program. You might be familiar with the Bridging the Gap training. And in regards to the question, I absolutely agree about the training of trainers. Of course, that's a big part of my job as well. So I've been working on trying to see how can that be developed. But then in regards to the language pair question, I like that part of the question a lot because that's something that I feel like as I look at interpreter training programs across the country, language specific training is not really as big a part of it. And coming from a place where I studied languages and linguistics, that is kind of my interest. So I really like kind of the approach CCHI is taking with this E2E test that they've developed or are developing, because I think that gives a lot of opportunities for us to kind of address this. How do we develop trainings for every language, or can we just tackle English and then transfer those skills into the other language? So I think that's a really interesting avenue that we're starting to explore in the field. What do you think, Kevin?
Yeah, that's a really good point, both of you. I think the E2E has a lot of potential. I'm really looking. I saw the report that just came out this May, and it was really insightful. Oh yeah, I'm zooming in from, going to webinaring in from Chicago. It's the city of Chicago right now. It's nice and sunny, really hot though, so I'm gonna stay inside in the AC. But regarding the question, you know, there's one particular study that I read when we first started the nonprofit, which is a study by, and I hope I'm pronouncing it right, Dr. Thakkar, and he basically was focusing on partnering with interpreter services to train residents on how to work with limited English patients. And what they did in the study was they used standardized patients in order to basically train the residents to work with limited English patients using the interpreters. And I thought that this could be very well applied to training interpreters as well, because the use of standardized patients is what they do when they're, training medical students, training residents. It's very common in the medical field, and I think that I haven't seen that being used too in depth with interpreter education. I feel as though it would be a good way to have a sort of standardized appointment, with testing certain standards of practice and codes of ethics that they might encounter in like a safe environment, and seeing how they would react to them and giving feedback on that. That's something that we certainly want to work towards, and I hope that other organizations would do that in the future as well, because it's a good way to make mistakes and learn from them, right, for the students. And Zoe, did you have any thoughts on that?
I just want to make sure I understood what you said. So you're thinking in terms of pairing up, the idea of pairing up interpreters in training with residents in training to work with interpreters, or we're already talking about fully fledged interpreters who are then helping the residents to become very well versed and comfortable in how to work with interpreters.
Right. The latter
Is it
is
the
what the
second one
study.
or the first?
The second one. The
Okay.
second one is what the study focused on, where
Yes.
trained interpreters are helping residents become familiar with how interpreters work, how to work with limited English patients. And I was thinking that the same thing could be applied to interpreter training as well, where we use standardized patients. We find an actor, essentially, someone who is a standardized patient and is bilingual, and we train them to pretend to be a limited English patient, and they can act as such. And the interpreter, it would basically be a simulated appointment in that sense, and the interpreter would be able to practice interpreting, and they'd be observed and get feedback on their skills. And that's something that I thought would be very well applied to our field. I haven't seen that being used too much, but maybe there are organizations already doing similar things.
I would love for Liz to respond with some of the experimentation that she's been doing, but I would like to also respond to that, what your the question as to have you seen. One of the things that I fundamentally do is, in fact, have interpreters in training in the course of the introductory training engage in taking on provider resident, other roles. And many of my individuals, because they are training to be dual roles, they come into the training with, in fact, other functions in the system. So they may already be a nurse, they may already be a tech. They actually, which is beautiful when it comes to training individuals to be dual roles, even though that is an area that there is some discourse about. If you're not doing it full time, you shouldn't be. But given the system that I'm working within, where that is in fact a program in place that I've worked over the last 5 years to in fact enhance and have individuals really feeling much more prepared and ready when they become qualified, there's a lot of that kind of engagement, which is improvisational, which requires individuals to really perform, and as they're learning to become interpreters and developing their skills within the context of these kind of scenarios. Bringing in individuals from the system has happened also sometimes when it comes to that language pair that is not represented robustly in the course of that group. And I will actually, I've had the good fortune to bring in individuals within the system, again, operating within UNMH and the Health Sciences Center as a whole, to support the specific coaching of English Romanian, for instance. Again, highly experimental, because in fact, there is such a thing as having coaches for these other language pairs. And we all know about that. And that is a beautiful thing when you think about introductory trainings, having your coaches whom you've trained as coaches to support the skills development component when it comes to these other language pairs that are in your mix. And so that to me becomes a wonderful and highly enriching discourse throughout, because they also are bringing different perspectives into the theoretical, the conceptual aspects of code of ethics, standards of practice. So I love that as well. Um, and I would like Liz to also because I know I'm aware of some of the experimentation that Liz has done, not just experimentation. She launched a program back in January with physicians, residents. I don't remember exactly, Liz, but I'm sure you could speak to that a little bit more.
Yeah, thanks, Zoe, and thanks for that, Kevin. I was feeling really excited to when you were talking. When last summer, I launched a program with two partners that I work with at Seven Sisters Interpreter Training, and it's exactly what you were describing, Kevin, where we have trained professional interpreters, seasoned interpreters come in and work with medical students. But rather than using standardized patients, we have the interpreters rotate in and out of the patient role, and we give them a lot of preparation up front so that they can they prepare this entire patient persona, and really people really get into it. I mean, it also helps them, they have to research their condition so that they can make complaints or ask questions that make sense in a medical context, and then the interpreter interprets. And it really, it's something that I think this model, even though we have used it only with seasoned interpreters, we do require that people have, we have people apply for the program, and we really want to make sure that people are successful in it. I think that the model could be good as well for newer interpreters. Something that I've been surprised, that has surprised me as a trainer in general, is when we get interpreters of different levels into a more advanced training scenario, you could have interpreters who've been working for years, and this is the first time that anyone has ever listened to them interpret and given them feedback. And so in that way, you've got these we've used this model with seasoned interpreters, but also at the same time, people who have never who've never been observed and received feedback. And I think, Kevin, to your point, to kind of loop around, I think this would be a great way to kind of bridge the gap, if you will, between between that initial training and then going out into into the field, especially when you're working, you know, a lot of new interpreters, including myself when I was new, work freelance, and man, you just walk into some situations that you're probably not prepared for. And I think that kind of experience, like you were saying, Kevin, where it's like a safe place to make mistakes and get feedback would be really nice for new interpreters or interpreter trainees.
Liz, I have a question about that. You mentioned that they're, or I don't know, maybe I didn't fully understand. So they're going through these kind of scenarios, and is it language specific? So is it all like, are there people watching who speak the specific languages that the participants speak?
So it is language specific, and the way that it has to work is that we have to have two interpreters work in pairs. So for example, if Zoe and I were working together, Zoe plays the part of the Spanish-speaking patient, and then I interpret, and then we work with a medical student. So in this way, we're able to include all languages spoken and signed. Ideally, I think it would be great to have a course eventually where we have higher enrollment and we do have just an additional person observing, because we ask the person playing the patient to play the patient and also give feedback to the interpreter, which is kind of a lot.
But I think it's a great solution, because that's something I struggle with too, with having a class with multiple languages is, do I force them to come in pairs so that they at least have someone? Do I try to get a volunteer or hire someone to come and like give them language specific feedback? Those are some of the things I struggle with.
I was just going to say I've experienced both, where it's only one Romanian speaker. And I tried to tell them the shortcomings of only being the one speaker in the whole group, and explain that the feedback they will get will not be the feedback that they would even if they had a fellow student with their same language pair, because you pick up things for each other. You're learning how to understand and self-critique, of course, as well. So it becomes an added, enhanced opportunity, even if you don't have a language coach, which is ideally what you would have as well. So these are things that happen along the way as you're working within the limitations of the situation that you find yourself. Absolutely. I think that everybody on this call, everybody here can appreciate where the limitations happen. Um, but I also think that it's wonderful to think outside of the box. What can we be doing? How can we bring somebody else to partner with us? Anybody you know in your network could be that additional coach that you may need. And so these are things that we can start and build on as we are structuring our next training or whatnot. And I'm sure, Tamas, you may have already you have a list of individuals that you maybe could reach out to based on the programs that you also oversee or support, as you said earlier. So I was hoping to ask another question, because it kind of loops back to what Liz was talking about, advanced versus less advanced, and this idea that I was wondering whether advanced level training, practice, feedback opportunities will become the standard. Will they actually become the standard within the interpreter educational program landscape, period, as a holistic approach to it? Or will it continue to be something that's kind of, as of now, still separate? You have your introductory, maybe language neutral training, and then you look to get more of this advanced practice training feedback as you have now become a qualified or trained, no longer an ad hoc interpreter. And what could that mean? How do you think this making a holistic version or more that stretches out to continuing education as we see it today, uh, will that elevate the professional interpreter skills and knowledge, uh, especially in terms of their performance quality across the profession? Or will there be other barriers that will prevent that from being the case? And that is a question I was also thinking about yesterday. So I was hoping, I don't know, Tamas, I don't know if you want to take this question and run with it for a few minutes.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I have some ideas, maybe we'll say I have some dreams about how it could work. this is a topic that comes up a lot around the different conferences, at interpreter conferences. Is 40 hours enough? Should we switch it to 60? Should the national requirements change? Or we can't force people to take more training than they're required to take, and then the CEUs is the only other way that we're really forcing people to do it, and that's only if they get nationally certified. So in my dream world, and this may be very idealistic, but I'd like it to kind of be like a degree program at a university, the university being the United States, kind of having a standardized way for people to keep track of all the trainings that they've taken and get credit for them. So not just I took a certificate here, I took a certificate here. Instead, I've taken these 5 trainings, which makes me a level 2 interpreter. Some sort of system that can quantify all of these different programs that are all over the States so that we can see this person has this much experience, this person has this much training, in a very simplified way. I feel like a lot of times people will take a 40-hour training and then kind of get lost in the system afterwards. So I'd like it to be kind of a more clear pathway, or more centralized, organized, but also collaborative, of course. So that's kind of my idea. There was also at one of the recent conferences we talked about, should interpreters be required to have a bachelor's degree, which kind of put me in a weird position, having worked with a lot of refugees and immigrants who just haven't had that opportunity, but are wonderful interpreters. So I kind of want to combine interpreter training into this road to a bachelor's degree kind of idea. It's a very unformed idea, but it's more of a dream, I think. What do you think about that, Kevin? Or what are your ideas for the future?
I think you're absolutely hit the nail on the head right there in terms of the field. It'd be great if it moved towards like another medical profession would be, where if you want to be a nurse, you go and get a 2-year degree, or maybe even more, you can specialize further. I think that the profession of interpreting demands that, if not more, and I'd like to see it even paired with complementary skills like translation when possible. But I feel as though sometimes it may be difficult for people that speak rare languages to dedicate themselves to like a degree program. I speak Gujarati. I'm not sure if I ever would have become an interpreter if I had to get a 2-3 year degree, because there's not demand. At least there was not demand in person as much as I would want there to be if I was pursuing that as a full-time profession. But I think for most languages, it's really something that would be ideal. And I also hope that it trends in that direction. And I think it is. I think that in terms of people wanting more feedback and more training, from my experience personally from our students, people want as much feedback as they can get. They're there to learn. They want to really improve their skills. And so I think when people want that, it's just a matter of organizations such as ours, trying to meet their needs and demands. So I think that's absolutely the future. I hope I see it going that direction. Liz, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, thank you both. I love your dream, Thomas. It makes me think that, the questions that we always ask, like, should we require more than 40 hours? Should we require a bachelor's degree? Like, these are maybe the wrong questions to be asking, and maybe the right questions are, more in line with what you all are talking about. How do we equip interpreters to do their job, and how can we, kind of like build this system that allows them to get on this pathway, because so they're ready to work and that they can be successful. So I like those questions, and I think that this dream could, I don't know, I think this dream could materialize, especially now that so many things have moved online. I feel like that makes things a lot more accessible now than they were before in many ways, where a lot of interpreters, I don't think that interpreters not wanting more training is a problem. I think that accessibility is a big problem, right? I don't think any interpreter doesn't want 60 hours of training. It's just in my experience, it's a matter of accessibility in terms of being able to carve out the time and cost, and the barriers that are always there. So I think that that maybe that's a new, in any event, a new direction for my imagination to go in terms of like how we move things forward, and prepare interpreters better. And so It
I'm
seems
in.
like it's not true, but it's like we have 6 minutes left, so I'm gonna hand the baton back to you before the clock runs out.
Well, I love the dream. I think that I've been thinking a lot about it. You put it very eloquently, Tamas. To me, it is about continuing to build a momentum, continuing to create new avenues for individuals who get bitten by the interpreter bug or out of necessity have become one. And while moving from ad hoc to professionalization, giving them the wherewithal to actually get there is very important, because the role that we play as interpreters is so fundamentally essential. And yes, we're talking in healthcare, but I could bring in the whole legal component, since my certification is also New York State Certified Court Interpreter as well as CCHI. So I see it across the board. And then there's education, there's other areas that are starting more and more to be formalized and professionalized in terms of education opportunities. And all of this just creates this amazing melting pot of opportunities that, while there are still gaps, these are the gaps with advanced training feedback, the moments that we think, how are we going to make this happen? I love the idea of online being present now and going and continuing to grow because of the accessibility, as Liz, you mentioned. And also I took the shadowing in the field online because of COVID over the last 18 months, not being able to go into the clinics to observe dual roles and staff interpreters in the field, but creating an opportunity to give concentrated feedback based on how they performed. And in an isolated, contained vacuum, but nonetheless focusing in on certain aspects of their patterns as they themselves came to recognize them. And I was that additional infusion of, you know, third set of ears, so to speak. Uh, and these are things that we can do now that we may not have thought of doing before. Out of necessity, we've had to. And it just means that all of those other trainers out there who are doing exactly that as well are coming up with amazing opportunities and possibilities. And again, as they themselves, Liz mentioned before, get more comfortable with these platforms, they are also more empowered to share in those contexts information, knowledge, and offer skills practice as well. Not the same as in person, I agree with that. So the idea of a hybrid always comes to mind for me. Um, complementary, complementing one aspect with the other to make it even a more powerful experience, and creating this level of preparedness for individuals that they may have never been able to experience before. That's my vision. So I want to thank you once again, everybody, for being here today. Um, and I don't know if any of you have any last minute add-ons based on what I just said, because I think we have a couple of more minutes.
If it's okay, I'd like to add on a little bit. I totally agree with your idea about hybrid training. That's been one of the big things they've been trying to kind of collect data on from all of the different trainers across the country. Bridging the Gap went fully online because of COVID, but we're kind of seeing some of the downfalls of that. Like you mentioned, it doesn't really replace in person. So it looks like depending on how COVID goes with the whole Delta variant and everything, it looks like we might be moving forward with the hybrid option that you mentioned, because I do think there's value in both of them. And we're excited to kind of see how that works out compared to online and in person. And then, of course, we'll give everyone feedback so we can all develop the types of programs that you're talking about.
Excellent. Thank you, Tamas. That's exciting. Kevin, Liz, I think we have 1 minute left.
Yeah,
So
well, you know, the nonprofit I direct, Americans Against Language Barriers, has been totally online because we started our training in the middle of the pandemic. But once things slow down a little bit, we are planning on going in person, because we do notice that distractions are less when there's online training. I'm never certain if the student is browsing the internet or paying attention. We do make sure that we try to stimulate a classroom environment, make sure everyone keeps their cameras on, but it's just not the same thing, as you guys know. So I'm looking forward to seeing some in-person training myself.
Excellent.
Well,
Oh,
I'll just, if I can thank my fellow group members, I think that this is how we get things done. And like everyone has talked about new ideas that have never occurred to me, after years of being a trainer. And so I think that this kind of dialogue is really helpful when we think about moving things forward. So thank you.
Yeah, time really flew. That was fast, 30 minutes. Wow.
That's right. Well, thank you, all of you. Thank you for being here today and talking about these things. I'm sure it was interesting for our attendees because some of you are trainers. I see by the names, and some of you today were interpreters, and you had this opportunity to see what trainers get to talk about when they get together. And as you see that the language and their focus is slightly different than when interpreters get together. So, and although of course all four of our trainers were interpreters at some point too, so we're always this blend, always this evolving continuum, and that's the beauty of our profession. And I think that's why so many other professionals don't understand us. And by us, I mean interpreters and interpreter trainers, because none of you are professors, right, today. And we do have professors of interpreting in the country, but the actual work is done by people like you in program like yours, not by the college professors at this point. And maybe we'll get there. Maybe we'll remain this unique hybrid profession, because language is such a complex thing. It's as complex as our society, as complex as our humanity. So thank you, everyone. Have a great rest of the day, and we will get together in September to talk about something else. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Bye.